Welcome to Trail Talk here on LTTV. I'm Chris Forde. I'm the Director of Marketing at Lincoln Trail College and Illinois Eastern Community Colleges. And I'm joined by Dr. Zahi Atallah, the President at Lincoln Trail College. How are you this morning, Zahi?
I'm doing great. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Well, we have been celebrating Community College Month all month long. We've been talking with different individuals that have had their lives changed by community colleges. And we have a really interesting guest this week that his life was changed by Lincoln Trail College, and that is Dr. Christopher Beasley, who is now a professor in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes, Dr. Beasley started here as one of our students. As you said, we were part of a transformation in his life, largely, of course, due to him, but we were a stepping stone on his way to his current successes and future successes, of course. Yes, he's at the University of Washington in Tacoma, and we're going to hear from him about the importance of community college in general and how, especially in rural areas and for the students who are typically left behind by higher education, how we can be that springboard toward a different and a future they would not have imagined even.
Well, Zahi, here again. I've said this, I think, every week that we've done this. I'm really excited to hear this.
So am I.
All right, so joining us now on Trail Talk is Dr. Chris Beasley, who is a professor at the University of Washington in Tacoma. And you have a Lincoln Trail College tie here as well. And Dr. Beasley, I just want to start off, if you could talk about your story and how Lincoln Trail College played a role in that and your launch to where you are today.
Sure. I probably come from a life history where you might not expect college, and you probably certainly wouldn't expect a professor to be, and maybe not an end result. Hopefully, it's not the end result now, but a result of that. I grew up in Casey, Illinois, near LTC there. I didn't really have a lot of opportunities in my life or see a lot of opportunities in my life. I usually talk about like growing up on the wrong side of the railroad tracks. I grew up in a poor family without a lot of resources. The teachers in college or teachers in high school, the closest thing they did to suggest that I was smart was to say I was too smart for my own good. That was kind of the biggest accolade I got. But certainly no one asked me if I was going to college, and I didn't really think about going to college. And I thought that the highest potential I could realize would be a good factory job. And not that there's certainly anything wrong with that, but to think that that's the only possibility in your life is probably pretty limiting. Ended up falling into the drug world, particularly as a way to feel like I had a place, to feel like I could contribute something to my community that was of need, and people might see that a different way, but that's sort of where my position was at the time. I was, providing something that my community at least felt like it needed, and I had some kind of role in that community. Did a short time in prison in Illinois, and when I got out, I had that good factory job before I went in, and I had social status within my peer group, and I was trying to figure out, like, how am I going to get some kind of life going again? And I was fortunate to have an uncle there at LTC at the time who asked me, introduced the possibility of going to college, and maybe that was a route I could take. I didn't really know what I would do with college. I just know I wanted to help people. So I started off human services. I didn't know if I could complete college or if I could do anything with it, but I thought I'll give it a try. And so I did. Obviously, it worked out to some extent, right? But I think that what I see as most valuable in my experience was helping me sort of work through those possibilities in my life, sort of landing at a place where it wasn't like an overwhelming setting. Like a university, I couldn't even imagine that being possible at the time. But it was a setting where I feel like, okay, I could try this out. It was supportive in many ways. It helped me explore different possibilities in my life and grow through that, and also introduce new possibilities for me.
Okay.
So it's an amazing story. Obviously, in looking at your current position and your line of research, you seem to have a big passion for the marginalized in higher education. In addition to marginalized in society, unfortunately, we overlap. So, of course, you're trying to empower people. Your example is a very powerful story of how people can be empowered. But how do you think community colleges could be part in similar journeys? I'm thinking about folks, parents of children. I'm thinking about impoverished people, like you described yourself. I'm thinking about recently incarcerated, unemployed. Folks who belong to disability groups, or folks who are not fitting the heterosexual concept of society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one place where community colleges are really helpful is that it's kind of like a big fish, a little pond, little fish, sort of like big pond kind of thing, where I think the barrier to entry in various different things is a little bit lower in community college, and the student groups are smaller, the classes are smaller, the student demographic is different, and so if you come from minoritized group, so whatever that might be. For me, it was formerly incarcerated, and coming from a low SES background, also I wasn't openly queer at the time, but also a queer student. But it's easier to see yourself in that space because there are more people like you in that space, and the groups and stuff are a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit easier to go into that without being intimidated. I think community colleges also just offer a lot more developmental opportunities. Like, TRIO was really critical when I was at LTC. I got to do mentoring within TRIO. People saw me as more than just like the physical labor that I could produce, and so I got to do tutoring. I worked in the computer lab, and that helped me see a different side of myself. The TRIO took me to New Orleans to Tulane University. That was the first time I'd stepped foot on a university campus. So there's so I did tutoring and mentoring and did that. And so there's just a lot of different support systems within community colleges that help identify talent, nurture that talent, and sort of like bring it to the next level. So I think that's particularly important for marginalized people who may not see those possibilities in themselves, and can have low barriers to exploring different possibilities, and support systems help nurture that exploration and take people to the next level when they're ready to get there.
So, Dr. Beasley, we have been celebrating Community College Month all month, and talking about the impacts that community colleges can make, and how higher education changes lives. But again, one of the areas that you're passionate about is that reentry for the formerly incarcerated, and it's also reentry month this month as well. So talk a little bit about what that is, first of all, and then also, how have you personally, in your research and in your time in higher education, how have you witnessed higher education changing people's lives?
Thanks. Reentry Month is a month where we celebrate and educate about reentry, and so the experience of people coming out of prison, and the attempts to reintegrate into society and get the support systems that people need to keep going back to prison. I think of that, the biggest challenge in reentry as being one of self-actualization. So I think it's important, even though like recidivism is a really, really important like social goal. Like, we don't want people going back to prison. Like, that's just not good for anyone, right? I don't think you get there without focusing on self-actualization, of helping people realize their potential. When I think back to my own experience, the reason why I was involved in the things that I was because, for whatever reason, internal, external, in society, the interaction between the two, I just didn't see a way in which I could really realize my potential in the world to meet fundamental human needs, like a need to belong, a need for self-esteem, a need for purpose. Like, those are all fundamental human needs. in regular society, if you will, in a pro-social way, I didn't see a way to meet those needs. And so one of the things that college did for me was to help me explore what society even was, because as a person from a marginalized group, I just didn't even identify it was something for other people, not myself. And to see different parts of me, explore different parts of myself, to see how they fit into that world, and to see my purpose and role in that. And I think that's really critical in reentry. I think that as people are able to realize their potential and to meet those fundamental human needs, they're just less likely to do the things that end up landing people in prison. And sometimes I think reentry focuses on like trying to reduce the risk to kind of contain the person, rather than helping the person actually reach their fullest in other ways. And so I think college is really instrumental in that. And that's kind of where my scholarship sits. Is I've mentioned possibilities a few times here, and that's what my scholarship really tries to better understand, is like, what are the possibilities that incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people imagine for ourselves? How do those shape our different pathways in life? How can those possibilities be broadened, and how can we support people as they try to move down those possibilities, and how does that lead then to other outcomes? And I've seen that a number of different ways. I co-founded a formerly incarcerated college graduates network. Back in 2014, we formalized it into an organization that now has probably about 1,700 members total in 44 states and 10 countries. About 150 people in that network have a doctoral degree. And certainly that's not the pinnacle, but it's different than what you would think of formerly incarcerated people. And that's a network in which people share and inspire one another. And we not only help nurture people's possibilities within the network, but we also try to share that outside of the network so that other people see a different side to us. There are only 4% of formerly incarcerated people get a bachelor's degree, so it's not a lot of people. It's one of the biggest inequities in higher education. The only thing even in the ballpark is foster care youth is around the same number. Any other inequity that you're thinking of in your mind right now is probably in the teens. So one of the biggest inequities in higher education. But that still amounts to hundreds of thousands of formerly incarcerated people with bachelor's degrees. So it's still a lot of people, and yet we don't think about that as the experience of formerly incarcerated people. But what I've seen is that as people encounter one another, they realize that they're not the only ones in the world that have that experience. And they see stories of people that have achieved even more. And we've just seen a lot of people then go on and, pursue doctoral studies, or, become executive directors, work in the White House and with top secret clearance, become mayors, become state legislators, doctors. We have one person that's a med school professor. Just like all these stories that you don't imagine as being connected to formerly incarcerated people. And so I think back to your original question of how I've seen what I've seen of people is that it seems like whenever people encounter others who are outside of the stereotype that we think of formerly incarcerated people, they're able to think of their futures in a different way and imagine different futures and imagine like how to get to those different futures. But if you're not exposed to those stories, all you're left with is the social narrative, right? The general social conversation about incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people and what is possible in that life. And you internalize that and don't really sort of work toward your fullest potential. I don't know if that exactly got to your answer. I kind of got off into my scholarship a little bit, but hopefully that was helpful.
That was great.
It's wonderful that you brought it up, to be honest. I mean, we in higher education, we should think about social justice and all of its elements, not just as a recruiting tool for us, but as a way to give back to our community and to be able to empower our folks. Our last question for the day is yourself, when you were in K through 12, what could a local higher education institution like Lincoln Trail do to tell you that you don't just matter, we are here for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because like my experience in K through 12 was I just didn't even consider college. Talents that I started to see weren't really nurtured. Like I remember I'm going to get off into a little bit tangent here, but I think it's important. When I was in high school, I was in a computer class. This is going to date me a little bit, but we were learning MS-DOS, right? So that dates me a little bit. And I was so far ahead of the material that the teacher had to just like sit me in a corner with books and say, here, study this extra stuff on your own, right? So clearly as someone that's exhibiting like passion, commitment to the subject, talent in it. And we were learning about executable files, and they said, get on the computers and try executable files. And this was before network security, really, so you can maybe imagine where this is going. I ended up in the system operator part of the network, just trying executable files, exploring, being curious, doing what I was doing, not trying to cause any harm whatsoever. And next thing you know, I had the librarian and the computer teacher behind me, and I just kept doing what I was doing because I'm doing exactly what I was told, right? I'm exploring, being curious. Next thing I know, I was down in the principal's office, and they were like, "You're hacking the network," and I'm like, I'm just doing what I was told. I was down there bawling and everything. And they tried to give me a detention, and I wouldn't serve it because I didn't do anything wrong. Eventually, I ended up getting a suspension and kicked off all the school computers, kicked out of computer class. And it's like, instead of like recognizing like, here's a talent that we can nurture and help him harness that, I was just kind of like kicked out, right? And so I think just in general, trying to identify youth in K through 12 who are exhibiting some kind of talent, regardless of whether it's showing up in punishment or whether it's showing up in class success, but maybe like some of both of that. Because oftentimes like kids are acting out because that they're bored, they're not reaching their potential, you know what I mean? Like there's just lots of reasons rather than like wanting to hurt people. But finding that talent, connecting with youth, maybe introducing them to college students who are like them in some kind of way that are doing something related, helping them identify what a next step pathway is. And that's what the possible selves literature suggests, right? Like you need to expose people to, it's a schema-based system. I won't get into that, but you have to expose them to information that helps them nurture that possibility and plant that seed of that possibility, and help people think through the strategies to move toward that possibility. And both need to be connected with how people see themselves, their sort of core identities and self-concepts, if you will. So finding people like them that may be on the college campuses, people they might connect with, and maybe even just like talking with them, or maybe sitting in on a class or a student club or something, somehow letting them know that like they matter in some kind of extent, that college could be a possibility. People like them go there, that there is something in them that is a talent that they could explore in college. And I think that even that is like a huge starting place there.
Oh, wonderful
that was
story.
amazing. Yes. Dr. Beasley, I want to thank you for your time with us today on Trail Talk. This has been wonderful.
I enjoyed it too, and I just wanted to say, welcome Zahi to LTC. I know you're new in that role, and I wanted to say thanks Chris for the invitation here and doing the podcast, and really thank you to LTC, especially Susan Polgar. I wanted to give her a shout out. Cora Weger. I don't think either one are at LTC anymore, but they, Susan was a professor there, psychology professor. And I ended up staying in psychology, so must have had some kind of impact. And Cora Weger ran the TRIO program, and everyone else at LTC, the staff, especially in financial aid, for creating that opportunity for me to walk into and support, seeing the potential in me and supporting my pathway there was really critical in my development. And I just want to say thank you to you all.
And thank you for choosing Lincoln Trail. Thank you for choosing a local community college, albeit Casey is a little further away from other towns, but we're very grateful for you and your story and your partnership with higher education in general.
Yes, and thank you for your very kind words.
Holy Moses, that was one heartwarming story. It's amazing. I can't imagine that Lincoln Trail was part of that amazing future and trajectory that Dr. Beasley has taken.
Yeah, again, we talk about community colleges changing lives, and it sounds like marketing buzzwords, but in this case, you're talking that true like chicken skin goosebumps sort of feel hearing his story.
Absolutely, and as we're talking about marketing, those are realities. Multiply that by over 1,000 community colleges across this nation, and now you can see the impact that we have on literally millions of people over the century or more we've been in existence across 50 states.
We've been celebrating Community College Month here on LTTV. If you like stories like that you just heard from Dr. Beasley, be sure and hit like on that video and ring the bell so you get notifications when you subscribe to our channel. And be sure and join us on our other social media platforms as well, where we post more great content that is happening here at Lincoln Trail College. So, for Dr. Atallah, I'm Chris Forde. We'll see you next time on Trail Talk on LTTV.